Assemblywoman Michaelle Solage represents New York State's 22nd district. She's chair of the Assembly Committee on Local Governments, and she's also chair of the New York State Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus for the Empire State Legislature. Welcome to the program, Chairwoman.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. So first, I did want to ask you about the state budget. So I know that that budget is passed, and but it took a while for the legislature to get that passed, right? And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on what was happening there and why it did take so long.
Well, when we talk about, billions of dollars, and in New York State, our budget is very close to $270 billion, which is more than some of the countries that exist around this globe, around this planet. We are talking about monies that impact every single part of our communities, whether it's education, healthcare, housing. That budget encompasses the topics that most impact our communities. And when I talk about our communities, we talk about communities of color as a caucus. And so ensuring that folks get the maximum benefit from that state budget is important to myself. And so the budget process in New York State is one that starts in January and it's supposed to end in the end of March. But you've seen lately it has gone beyond that. And it's only because folks are having intense conversations and issues and talking about issues that are important to us. And in New York State, we are very special. Not only are we the Empire State, but in our state constitution, it gives the executive literally the ultimate power to dictate the budget, and the legislature has to negotiate changes. And so we have, as legislators, have to fight and push back against push back against executive powers in order for us to have a budget that's reflective of our values and our commitments.
Mm.
So it takes a
You know,
while, but we get it done at the end of the day. We don't have the dysfunction of Washington, but sometimes, we get down and dirty.
Yeah, I did want to get to that later on about like what's happening in Washington, how that might affect New York State. But talking about all those various changes, can you offer any insight as to how much of a role the caucus played? How much influence over that process?
Yeah, well, the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus is comprised of 80 members. It's a
Mm,
bipartisan organization, so we have Democrats and Republicans. We have folks from all across the state, from Buffalo to Montauk, and we are one of the largest and most diverse caucuses in New York State. And so our mission has always been to uplift historically marginalized communities. And so when we talk about our influence, we really center equity in policy, and we want to ensure that diverse voices get a seat at the table. And so we are now, 80 people. That is a lot. But within those 80 people, many of us are chairs of committees. We are head of different task forces. We're legislative leaders. Many of us are prominent policymakers, and so we have the ability to organize and push our shared priorities and negotiate with not only the leadership within the Assembly and Senate, but also push leadership in the executive and within state agencies. So it's really a voting block, and it's especially important in key votes and opportunities that arise where we can amplify our collective power.
mm. Speaking of priorities, what are you like right now in that budget, the budget that just passed? And then you're looking at the next session, which is going to start in January.
Mhm.
What are those collective priorities right now? Can you name a few or more?
Yeah. Oh, I think what's top of mind in everyone's legislative list of priorities is the affordability crisis. Folks are rent and house burdened. Housing affordability and displacement is particularly troubling in communities of color. We also have rising energy burdens, where, utility, affordability, and investment. It goes hand in hand, but it's something that our communities are tackling with. And then, when we talk about other priorities, of course, education is important to caucus members and members of the legislature. And for us, too, we are confronting a climate crisis that we've always been at the brunt end of. When you talk about waste treatment plants, or when there's environmental atrocities, they are more likely to happen in communities of color. And so for us, we want to prioritize the climate crisis. We want to ensure that frontland communities are provided with resources and also job opportunities in the clean energy space. I mean, I can go on if you want to talk about ensuring healthcare, again, making sure that, Black women are not dying during birth and prioritizing reproductive and maternal health. That's important to us. I could sit here for hours with you, but it's all about making sure that we are organized and using our collective powers to tackle the many issues that are important for our communities.
And does that become tough or explain to us how tough it
Yeah.
becomes when you're pressing on those priorities and
Yeah.
you're trying to negotiate those priorities with other members of the caucus, excuse me, of the
Yeah.
legislature outside
Yeah.
of the caucus?
Oh, well, remember, we are a multicultural state. We have a lot of personalities, and we have a lot of priorities. And so we, as a caucus, are influential, but I think folks outside of the caucus also look to us as a means to leverage collective power. And so at times it may be difficult to see through the trees, but at the end of the day, we understand that we all work for New Yorkers, and what's good for one New Yorker is good for all New Yorkers. So we may have differences in priorities across communities, but we're always about engaging in dialogue. And so for us, like during caucus meetings, we are always requesting that both sides of an issue come speak before us. It's not about just prioritizing what we think, but also hearing from the other side. So, for example, when we talk about issues with housing, we want to hear from both developers and from tenants and from those who are in houses. We want to hear from everyone, and I think that's where our collective power is strongest, is hearing from everyone and getting a policy that is encompassing and holistic of all the issues.
Mm. Which brings me to another question. I'm real curious. So, I talk to legislators in big states, like say a neighboring state like Pennsylvania. Let's bring that out as an
Hmm.
example. And there's this big urban and rural divide.
Hmm.
So how do you tackle that, right? Because the lion's share of your caucus's members are from like
Hmm.
urban areas or metropolitan regions. So
Yeah.
how do you balance that with rural priorities?
I think it's about making sure we all get together in a room and hear from all of the members. We have caucus meetings, and at times it gets rowdy. When you have more than 30 people in a room and they all have their different opinions, it may seem hectic, but it's an opportunity for us to hear from our fellow colleagues. At the end of the day, we are all state legislators. We all live in New York. And when we come to the table to discuss topics and issues, it's a beautiful thing because we understand that we have a greater goal in helping our state and our communities. And so, at times, like I said, it may be crazy as members engage in dialogue and negotiations, but at the end of the day, we want to advance an agenda, and we have a shared purpose, and it gets us going.
Mm. You had a pretty busy session here this year, 2025. So compared to 2025, are you expecting a busier 2026? As far as the caucus, do you expect to exercise your combined weight a bit more extensively in 2026?
I believe so. We have a lot of challenges. Being from New York, it seems that the federal government is, scrutinizing every single one of our dollars. And so many of our programs were cut. in the last budget bill. And so we are going to have to make a lot of tough choices here in New York State, to ensure that we're providing services while using every dollar wisely. And so outside of the federal intervention, I also think that there are many issues, like for example, criminal justice issues, that as communities that we need to discuss. Back in the early 2000s, we were able to raise the age of criminal responsibility here in New York State, which means that 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds were not put into the adult prison system. We were one of the last states in the nation to do it. And unfortunately, now there's a conversation, uh, and I believe it's going to be a big topic in the next legislative session, to roll back on some of the criminal justice reforms that we implemented. And it's disturbing because when you talk about these young people getting into the school to prison pipeline, a significant number of them are Black and Brown individuals who, in my belief, are not being given enough resources, support, and mental health, initiatives to help them uh, be better citizens. And so we need to make sure that we are, having a holistic. I always go back to this holistic conversation. If there needs to be some sort of changes, as a legislature, we need to have a conversation. And then as an executive, they need to come to us and have, additional conversations so that we're not over policing our schools or creating more inequities in our communities.
Mhm. Yeah, what is that relationship like between the caucus and the governor?
So far, it's been great. I
Mm,
really commend Governor Hochul. She is about building bridges and having conversations. At times, we have differences, as with everyone, but we try to have appropriate conversations to move her. And her team and her have been receptive at times. Of course, there are always going to be challenges. No one's perfect, but I think she acknowledges that the caucus is a significant entity in the state legislature. It's more than 50 years old, and she understands that we have a shared mission.
mm, mm. And going back to the administration in Washington, obviously it's quite a tenuous time, tense time there in Washington. Washington, in particular, the new administration's relationship with states, and so how do you further tackle that? Particularly on immigrations regarding uh, immigration. You just mentioned criminal justice, climate crisis, housing, et cetera. So it looks at it from a different view. And obviously, that type of policy has a disproportionate impact on the communities that your caucus represents.
Yeah. It's been difficult on the immigration front because, as immigration's under the federal purview, but in New York, immigration is a cornerstone of our community.
Mm,
Many of us are foreign-born individuals. We come to this country seeking the American dream, and in New York, it's an essential part of our economy. If you were to remove every single immigrant, I really truly believe that the New York economy would fail. And so when you're talking about what's happening on the federal level, it's not only emotionally impacting many New Yorkers, but it's also societally and economically impacting our communities. We want to pass a lot of legislation that pushes back against the federal government. But unfortunately, we, are facing challenges because, this federal government doesn't respect state laws. They claim state sovereignty, but in my opinion, and this is only my opinion for the podcast, that they don't respect that in New York State. We believe that immigration is a good thing and that our communities thrive when we have a diverse set of folks helping New York move forward. And so there are a couple of bills on the docket, like New York for All, and other pieces of legislation that we are trying to push, but we are having difficulty gaining the political will to do it because there's a belief that even if we were to pass these bills, the federal government would not respect it. For example, in New York State, I passed a bill called Protect Our Courts Act, which prevents ICE from entering into state courthouses and prevents ICE from arresting individuals going to and from court. So we were able to find a piece of statute that says that citizens are protected going to and from court, and so we attach non-citizens to the legal language, and it was a standing law that we've had since the last Trump administration. And even now, the and federal agents at one point in New York State wasn't respecting the law. And actually, the DOJ, Department of Justice, is suing New York State because of the law, because they said that it infringes on the federal government. And so, right now that's being litigated, but this federal government doesn't respect state sovereignty, and it's unfortunate because our country was built with the basis that states have their rights and they should be respected. So if we want to protect our immigrant community, I think that as long as it's not endangering anyone else, that it should be respected.
Mm. One final question there too, Chairwoman. So you've got this very large caucus. As you mentioned earlier, it's very multicultural, right? So it's not just a Black caucus, it's other
Mhm,
communities included in that, Puerto Rican, Hispanic,
mhm.
Asian, right, and others. So um, that's a lot of responsibility and weight on a chairperson. And so how do you manage that? How do you coordinate all those different views and perspectives? One might say it's like herding cats, right?
Yeah, at times it's like herding cats, and it's just an honor of a lifetime to be able to be chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. It's wonderful to see that people of color can really galvanize resources and ensure that diverse voices are heard. And I think that, myself and the caucus team, and I have to give a shout out to the caucus staff who helps, us carry the mission. I think that we work collectively because it's important that our communities are heard. You have, people of color are not a monolith. They are very diverse, and they have different socioeconomic aspects to them, different personalities, different cultural entities, identity. And it's important that we acknowledge that and that we embrace it and that we push it. And so I do believe there's a world of possibility where we can all come together in harmony and be equal, but it's going to take effort and time. And it's also going to take us to push back against any hate or any, malintentions towards New Yorkers and Americans. So I I'm an optimistic person. So for me, I love the work that I do, and I love working with all my colleagues, and I'm so grateful to them. And every day it's a new day, but we are confronting the issues that are important for New Yorkers and finding solutions to it. And at the end of the day, when we find solutions and implement policy, it makes it worth all the challenges.
Mm. All right. Thanks again, Chairwoman, for joining us. That's it for this segment. I'm Charles Ellison, your executive producer and host. A round of gratitude to our partners, the Council of State Governments and the Civic Literacy and Media Influence Institute at Learn for Life. And also, we have Diane Ellison is executive producer. Raven Robinson is a senior producer as well. Until then, you can find this episode and more at thebnote.com. Don't forget to subscribe, by the way. And thanks for watching. Be safe out there.